Well, I've entitled the message today, Avoiding COVID-19. Everyone is fully aware of this problem. I think that there will be more deaths from the way it's being handled than what the disease would bring, especially in other countries, because of the way it's being handled. And I believe it's a test for Seventh-day Adventists. And in a sense, a test for the whole world. It's a test in several ways, but I want to talk about the method of healthcare today. The world's method of healthcare basically says, live any way you want, because we got a pill, or we got a surgery, or we've got some kind of treatment that can take care of whatever happens to you. So don't worry. Just live the life the way you would like to live it. And so many Seventh-day Adventists have been doing the same kind of lifestyle. And therefore, Seventh-day Adventists, many, are fearing the same fear that the world has, and are desperate to be protected. And so the world comes up with an idea of how we can be protected, and there is some validity to it, but it's not all valid. For instance, just to give you one snippet that I heard, and you know, most of what I'm hearing is from doctors. It's not from just anybody. And the doctor said, when you seclude yourself, your body gets less able to fight whatever germs are out there. And so you're actually opening yourself up to more likelihood that you'll get sick. And yet this is the primary method that's being promoted. But enough about that. I want to talk about God's way for us to avoid COVID-19. Oh, it's not under. Or any other disease, because believe me, this wasn't the first one, and it's not going to be the last one. Oh, maybe somebody had it. Yeah, okay. How do we get it over on the computer? Okay. Okay, there we go. But, you know, this is a warning, too, of what's ahead. And this is not going to be the last thing, and hopefully they're not going to tell us to seclude ourselves with all the rest of them that come along, or we're not going to be able to do anything, and our economies are going to all collapse, and there will be nothing left. But let's look at a few things for the future first. In Matthew 24, verses 7 and 8, it says, "And there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places." Now we have seen a huge increase in earthquakes and famines. We don't always hear much about those because in this country we don't have as much a problem with that. But those things are sort of commonplace. But now the pestilence is showing itself. And it's not the first kind, but pestilence. But Jesus warned this would happen. And in Luke 21:11, it's recorded again, "And great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines and pestilences." So we're going to have plenty of these experiences, and especially here in the last days. Now in Counsels to Health, page 461, says he, talking about Satan, sweeps away the ripening harvest and famine and distress follow. I'm sure you've heard of the grasshoppers that wiped out crops. And interestingly enough, COVID-19 is wiping out food as well. And they can't sell their food, so they destroy it. The animals have to be euthanized because they can't market them. And it's wiping out food even in this country. He imparts to the air a deadly taint, and thousands perish by the pestilence. Notice how serious it is. Thousands perish because of this deadly taint that the devil puts in the air. These visitations are to become more and more frequent and disastrous. Now, I'm the last one to try to say that COVID-19 is nothing to worry about. It is a serious pestilence. And unfortunately, a lot of people are dying. However, the regular news doesn't tell you the real truth about what's going on. But from 30 to 50% of the deaths are in nursing homes. And of course, these people are being mistreated today because nobody can go and see them. And therefore, there's nobody watching. I saw a video where one of the attendants was just pounding this man with his fist on one side and then on the other of the face. And he was so, I don't know how in the world he could have a job there. But he even videoed himself and put it on one of the social media and ended up getting in prison over it. But then they had videos of other mistreatments in nursing homes, and the news commentators said, well, you know, there's nobody to watch what they're doing now. They're keeping all the guests out, and so the people can vent whatever they don't like about this person. And you know, people that are that old are usually really nice or really terrible, because your character intensifies as time goes by, and by the time you get to your elderly years, you're either miserable to be around or you're really sweet to be around. So you want to be careful what direction you're going. First Testimonies, page 268. I was shown the inhabitants of the earth in the utmost confusion. Does that sound like things are going to get better? No. War, bloodshed, privation, want, famine, and pestilence were abroad in the land. So it's going to be a lot of things, but among them, pestilence. My attention was then called from the scene. There seemed to be a little time of peace. Now, I believe we are before this time of peace right now. And then there's going to come a time of peace. There seemed to be a little time of peace. Once more, the inhabitants of the earth were presented before me, and again, everything was in the utmost confusion. I believe this is after the close of probation. Strife, war, and bloodshed with famine and pestilence raged everywhere. So what we're looking at right now is a little foretaste to wake people up of what's coming when it's too late to turn to Jesus. If they don't turn to him now, it's going to be too late, and there will be no way to protect oneself at that time and at least, you know, be able to have eternal life. Right now, it's a wake-up call. Get ready for heaven, or it will be too late. But now let's spend most of our time on what did God have in mind for his children? Did he have in mind that we be afraid of all these pestilences and sicknesses that take the people of the world? In Exodus 15, which is a long time ago, right? Verse 26, we see God's plan. And by the way, previous to the Egyptian period, people could live any way they wanted and nobody got sick. So at the Egyptian period, disease began to come upon the people because of their lifestyle. And as soon as disease had been there for a little while, God made this promise. He said, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and wilt do that which is right in his sight, and wilt give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee. How many diseases? None. I won't put any of these diseases on you. Now you might say, well, I didn't know God made people sick. Well, the reason they get sick is disobedience. And God he's not able to change his laws. So if people are going to disobey, they're going to get sick. And he says, I'm the one that's responsible because I ordained the laws and they broke the laws and therefore they paid the consequence. I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians. You see, the sickness is for the Egyptians, not for the Israelites. For I am the Lord that healeth thee. Now, the best plan is to not get sick through obedience, but even if we get sick, he says, don't worry, I am the Lord that healeth thee. And so he has a wonderful plan, and it's stated in a little different way in Exodus 23:25. He said, I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. Now that promise has not been removed from the Bible. Amen. And therefore we can still hold God accountable for this, but it has to be through obedience. We cannot expect him to heal our sicknesses and take away sickness from us if we do not do what he's asked us to do. So I'm going to look at a few health principles. Now, many of you have heard this, but maybe some of you are not following it fully. So it'll be a reminder. And others might not be aware of some of this. In the book Counsels on Health, page 92, it says, perfect health requires a perfect circulation. There is a lot of our modern society intended to make us sick and to hinder the circulation, that if we had perfect circulation, we would have perfect health. Now, there may be a few things that, cannot be changed by that once you get it, but we're speaking in a general sense here. This is what would happen. It might take till the third and fourth generation for it to fully be realized, but this is the goal, to live a lifestyle where you have perfect circulation, because that will lead to perfect health. And God has given us more details on what kind of lifestyle that should be. In Ministry of Healing, page 127, pure air. I heard one news note that the air quality that people are breathing makes a difference in whether they catch COVID-19. Interesting. Sunlight, abstemiousness, rest, exercise, proper diet, the use of water, trust in divine power. These are the true remedies. One of the reasons why lifestyle work is so wonderful is that most diseases are cured simply by putting people on this program and taking away their pills little by little. often as necessary. But this plan leads to wellness and people recover. But you know what some of the lifestyle guests have noticed? That the workers don't live by the same rules that they're preaching to the guests. And so we have some coming up to do. Now there is an illustration in the Bible of the truthfulness of God's words. And it comes from the children of Israel during the 40 years that they were in the wilderness. And here is a statement of what condition they were in afterward. I mean, it's reflecting back on those 40 years. Moses said, "Thy raiment wax not old." I don't know whether modern society would be happy with that. Wearing the same clothes for 40 years. I'm not sure we'd consider that a blessing, but it saves a lot of money. So their clothing didn't get old. Neither did thy foot swell. In other words, no illness during that time. These 40 years. So as we go through these 8 laws of health, I would like to just reflect upon the Israelite experience during those 40 years. The first one, we're going to go in the order that it said it in the quote, pure air. Well, they lived in tents. And they were marching very frequently, moving from place to place. The Bible says sometimes they were only in one place for a part of a day, and then they had to move on. And so they got lots of fresh air, and there was no pollutants in the air out there in the wilderness. No factories, nothing that would, no cars, so on. And so they had truly pure air. And as a result of that pure air, it was part of the picture of why at the end of 40 years there was nobody sick. And right along with that one, if you're getting pure air, you're often also out in the sunshine. And we do have to protect ourselves against too much sunlight, especially when we're young, apparently, is when most of the damage gets done. But sunlight is very important, and Dr. Grievous and probably others are recommending taking vitamin D, because even in this location, a lot of the year we don't get enough sunlight or enough vitamin D from the sun. And so substituting it is helpful to make sure that we get the benefit that we're supposed to get from the sunlight. The next one is abstemiousness, or I'm going to call it temperance. In Patriarchs and Prophets 562, it gives a definition of what are we talking about when we speak of temperance. True temperance teaches us to dispense entirely with everything hurtful. So is there anything that you know is harmful that you're not willing to stop using? If you're going to follow the path of temperance, and if you're going to be protected against COVID-19 and the rest of them that are coming, which my expectation is that each one that comes will be worse. In other words, this one is the best of the last ones that we're going to face. So we've got to dispense with everything that's hurtful and to use judiciously that which is helpful. Some people say, well, it's healthy to eat this, so I'm going to eat too much. Or it's healthy to be in the sun, and they're going to be out there too much. It's not just talking about diet here. Temperance is talking about all the habits of our life. And so we can end up not being careful with the things that are good. There are few, so maybe not everyone here There are few who realize, as they should, how much their habits of diet have to do with their health. Their character. Notice it's not just our health. It has to do with our character, their usefulness in this world, has to do with what we're able to do for other people and for ourselves, and their eternal destiny. Does it matter if we're temperate? Wow, there's a big consequence if we're not temperate. That we will have trouble with our health, we will have a misformed character, we will be less useful in the world than what we could be, and we just might miss out on heaven and eternity. And if we think correctly about eternity, suppose we die at 25 years old here, but we get eternity. It doesn't really matter, because eternity goes on forever and ever, never stops. And so we need to put adequate weight upon what affects our eternal destiny. Another one, especially about us as Seventh-day Adventists, from CTBH 117. Christian temperance and Bible hygiene. Many, even of those who profess to believe the special truths for this time, are lamentably ignorant with regard to health and temperance. Well, that being the case, it's not surprising that Seventh-day Adventists are fearing the same fear that the world has. They're wanting to do the same things the world is doing, because they're just as vulnerable. They need to be educated, and unfortunately that's not being done everywhere. They need to be educated line upon line, precept upon precept. The subject must be kept fresh before them. This matter must not be passed over as non-essential, for nearly every family needs to be stirred up on the question. How many families? Almost every one. Might be some exceptions, but almost every one. The conscience must be aroused to the duty of practicing the principles of true reform. God requires that his people shall be temperate in how many things? All things. Unless they practice true temperance, they cannot be susceptible to the sanctifying influence of the truth. So here it really puts emphasis on our heavenly destiny, and that temperance is really important to make it. Well, looking at a few others here, rest. I won't ask for a show of hands of how many of you go to bed early, but we have been instructed in the 7th Manuscript Releases, page 224, sleep is worth far more before than after midnight. 2 hours good sleep before 12 o'clock is worth more than 4 hours after 12 o'clock. Now, one of the reasons why many people stay up late, well, they may consider themselves a night owl, but their body works the same as everybody else's, whether they think they're a night owl or not. And so, by staying up late, they miss some or all of those 2 hours. And, right now, we're on daylight saving time. My wife reminds me that when it's 10 o'clock, it's really only 9 o'clock. And so, there may be some truth to that. But we don't want to get less than 2 hours of sleep before midnight. Because if you're a busy person, you want to be efficient. To be efficient, you can be healthy on less sleep if you get 2 hours before midnight. But if you don't go to bed till midnight, then you're going to have more hours, or you're going to be vulnerable to sickness. And, I can't say that I've always practiced that. I had the excuse that many people have. I had too much to do. I couldn't get all that sleep. But you know what? I started waking up after a while. When I would catch the flu, it might be 10 days or 2 weeks, and I couldn't do much of anything. And I thought, this is crazy. I should get more sleep on a regular basis so I don't catch the flu, and therefore I can accomplish more that way. And so I've been, after I retired, I'm sorry I didn't fully learn it before, but after I retired from having such a busy duty, I've been able to do it. And I can't say I've never caught the flu, but I sure have gotten it a lot less than what I used to get it. Also, we're told that we should get 8 hours. Sometimes they say 7 or 8. But I'm willing to guess that if they're going to do 7, they better get their 2 hours before midnight. Here in Medical Ministry, page 80, it says, "You are God's workmanship, and under a full sense of your accountability to God, you are to treat yourself aright. Give yourself proper time to sleep." So one of the things to treat ourselves right, not just so we can be healthy, but so we can be a blessing to humanity, it says, "They who sleep give nature time to build up and repair the weary waste of the organism." Now, it wasn't this way back in the Garden of Eden, but when sin came in, as we go through our day, there is a buildup of waste in our body. And we eliminate some of it, but not all of it. And so God has set it up where we can sleep, and while we are sleeping, if we sleep adequately, our body is getting cleaned of this waste. But if we don't sleep enough, we wake up in the morning, we might not feel like we got a hangover, but eventually, if we do that, we will feel like we have one, and that waste is just not being eliminated. So we need plenty of sleep. Now, many of us here are older, and my heart doctor said the benefit or the way to cope with atrial fibrillation, which unfortunately I've had now for a while, he said the answer is naps. And so I've been taking naps ever since that happened, and it seems to be preserving my energy and my ability to still do quite a bit. On exercise, here's a big one, because if we were to add up all of the jobs that people have today, I think most of them are sedentary jobs. They're not physical jobs. And so we really have to pay attention to make sure we get exercise. Councils on Education, page 9, is talking about students, but as I've thought about what God says in regard to students, He's trying to get us in our student days used to a lifestyle that we will follow the rest of our life because we learn the benefits of it. So here's the lifestyle for students. The exercise of the brain in study without corresponding physical exercise has a tendency to attract the blood to the brain, and the circulation of the blood through the system becomes unbalanced. The brain has too much blood and the extremities too little. And guess what? You can't have perfect circulation. So sickness is likely because of that. And at least it will make us more susceptible to those things, because perfect circulation brings perfect health. So we need to get an hour or two per day. If we can find any way to fit that in, and if we can't, it might be good to consider making a change in even our job, because we're headed for trouble. We're headed for a lot of sickness that's going to come into our world. I think gardening is the best, but of course walking is also an excellent activity. The walking is for the rich, seems to me. People that have plenty of spare time. When I get exercise, I have to work in the garden because I don't have time to walk and garden. So it's an excellent exercise, especially if you will make sure that you do some of the exercise type activity in the garden. For instance, I instead of always using the rototiller, although that gives you more exercise than you might think, but I use the hand device of stirring up the ground. And if you do it when the ground is somewhat moist, I think it was about a half an hour, I stirred up most of my garden with that device. But if you wait till it's baked hard, oh boy, then it's a different story to try to stir up the ground. Diet. In the book Education, page 203, it says, flesh food also is harmful. In other words, a plant-based diet has been proved more and more to be the best way to go. And more people are moving in that direction. And it seems to me that the Lord is using COVID-19. I don't think he's the one that sent it, but he's using it to take away the meat from people. And they've had to slaughter all kinds of hogs. That's the worst kind of meat to eat. And so they're going to have to get rid of those. It's going to be hard for some people to get their pork. And the same with some of the other animals. Flesh food also is harmful. Its naturally stimulating effect should be a sufficient argument against its use. And the almost universally diseased condition of animals makes it doubly objectionable. Now, if that was true 100 years ago, that there was a universally diseased condition of animals, it hasn't improved any. And if you look at some of the videos that are out there, you'll see that they have plenty of evidence. Now, probably this audience, most of you are not struggling with that, but the next one you might be. You need to leave off the sweets. Now, I was a sugaraholic growing up, and I went to work in an Adventist institution, a hospital. I've always been connected with hospitals or lifestyle centers my entire life. But they had sweets for every meal. So I had sweets for breakfast, I had it for dinner, and I had it for supper. But having so much of that, I became allergic to it. And so I got to where I had no energy, and we started hunting around. Why does this problem exist? And discovered it was all kinds of sweeteners, including honey, molasses, and the whole works, everything. And so I had to quit eating sweets. And I was still overworking and not getting enough sleep, so I didn't get the full benefits, but I did get benefits to having energy again. And I'm sure it helped with the sickness as well. So as long as COVID's around, I recommend you try the same. Science has proven that when you partake of sweets, your white blood cell count goes down. and your body is less able to fight disease. Now, the world's idea is distance yourself from everybody. But God's idea is fortify yourself against that person. Because it's not just COVID that is spread when the people don't even have sickness yet. You know, they act like this is a new idea, that you could infect somebody and not even know you have it. But that's the way all these things are. All the flu bugs are that way, even a cold bug. Catching a cold from somebody, you're going to be faced with people that have these diseases if you go anywhere or do anything. And God's way of protection is live so that those bugs won't get you down. Another one that's, I think many Adventists fail on is eating late at night. Notice this one from Child Guidance, page 389. As a result of eating late suppers, the digestive process is continued through the sleeping hours. But though the stomach works constantly, its work is not properly accomplished. So eating late at night causes two problems. Number one, the stomach has to be working while we're trying to sleep, so our sleep is not as good as it would have been. And second, it can't digest properly while we're sleeping. And so it stays there too long, and it becomes a problem to us. Now, I used to excuse myself on this one because even though I preferred to eat earlier in the evening meal, and I even had the doctor tell me, you're so skinny, you've got to eat a third meal. So I started eating a third meal, but the problem is I could never fit it in till just a little time before bedtime. And I did gain some weight, but eventually it started creating some stomach difficulties for me. And so I decided I am going to give this up. Well, my stomach recovered, and I've been doing a lot better since then. So we need to pay attention to that one as well. Water, probably don't need to say a lot, but hot and cold showers build up your immune system. It's a good way to start the day. If you want to avoid COVID, you could even do it more than that, but certainly in the morning. Also, drink plenty of water. Drink 8 to 10 glasses a day. This assists the body in eliminating those poisons even before we're sleeping, to have plenty of water, and that assists us. Now, for me, as soon as I heard about it, I wanted to do it, but it's been a battle to remember to do it. And so I've worked really hard and finally gotten to where generally I do get enough water during the day. And then if we do get sick, use the water treatments if needed. I wish there had been more opportunity for those who believed in the water treatments to handle COVID-19. We do know that the ventilator is not the answer. They killed people with that ventilator. And so, what they thought was the answer wasn't. But I think that it's very possible that water treatments, and I'm not sure it's the revulsive, the hot and cold, because I had an experience one time when I had totally prostrated myself by overwork and lack of sleep and breaking all these health laws, so that asthma got such a strong hold on me that I could hardly breathe. And, that's the problem with COVID. People get to where they just can't breathe, and there's swelling in the lungs, and that restricts the flow of the air. And so, and then if they catch pneumonia on top of it, why, they're in a pretty serious condition. Well, as we were thinking about what to do, the thought came to mind, why don't you try a hot half bath. Anyone that has a tub in the home, you can do that. And you want to sit to where you're up to your waist in hot water. And since the breathing was so bad, I would do it for half an hour. And, make you sweat like crazy, keeping that water just as hot as you could stand for half an hour. But what happened was, after that first treatment, I believe it was the first one, instantly I could breathe better when I got out of that. And another thing, what it did, I could feel it. It made the blood just circulate through the body just really fast, because it had been pulled into the lower part of our body away from the lungs. And then once that hot was removed, it went back to trying to establish its circulation. And as a result, I began to improve. And it took a while to overcome all the abuse that my body had been given. But I got to where I could breathe normal again. And then I had to live more carefully after that. I can't say that will take care of COVID, but if I got COVID, I'd sure try it, I believe. The last one is the most important of all, but how can we really trust in God if we don't keep the first 7? You see? So they all go together. But once we've done all that we can, once we practice what God has told us to do, now we can trust in divine power. And I believe this promise is for us, both now and in the future. Psalm 91, verses 5 through 8. Thou, it's like saying, Seventh-day Adventists shall not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day. So that's the war part. Nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. I have an autocorrect here that keeps changing the words. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. Well, they're telling us that there's 100,000 deaths in the United States. However, there's other evidence that they've padded the record. So I don't know what it is, but it's probably not 100,000. But even if it was 100,000, notice the promise that it will happen, but we are going to be protected. Now, sometimes, he can't protect us because we've been disobeying, but then he will restore. He says he's the healer, and he will restore. Another one that I think we can use is Mark 16, verse 18. If they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. Now that's talking about the tendency that enemies had to poison the disciples. As they would carry the gospel to the world, they would put some poison in their drink, and they would expect for them to die. But God said, no, you're not going to die. If you drink any deadly thing, it's not going to hurt you. And so if somebody gives us the COVID germs, God says, it shall not hurt them. And we see here in 3 John verse 2, I forgot to put the text there. Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. Now this one's very interesting, because the more spiritually minded we are, the more connected with Jesus we are, the more we can have health. And therefore, to work on our spiritual life is very important. in the time of COVID. Because if we are strong spiritually, it will help us to fight COVID. And Isaiah 58:8 says, "Then thine health shall spring forth speedily." This is in the setting of doing good to others, helping other people. You know, I wished, I wasn't sure I was supposed to do it, but I wish that a bunch of people who really believed all this and practiced all this could have gone and given treatments to people with COVID, because I believe that this promise would be fulfilled. Then thine health shall spring forth speedily. I heard of a woman during the 1918 pandemic that was going from house to house, exposing herself to the people that had that, and she was bringing a folk remedy that was bringing healing to people all, along. And, why aren't we able to do that? Now, maybe some are, and I just haven't heard about it. But I believe that God is, first of all, saying, listen, if you want to do this work in the last days, you're going to have to live by the health rules that I have laid down. Because if you don't, you're not going to be able to help anybody. You're going to have to hide in your house like everybody else is doing. You won't be able to help anyone else. But if you will live the way I've told you, then I will protect you against all these things, and you can continue to serve as long as time shall last, as far as until the close of probation. After that, it's too late. But between now and then, we are to serve and to help people be able to get well and to have the truths that they need to know. So I hope this has helped us to be encouraged. I've had people warn me ever since COVID came along, don't go, don't do this, don't do that. But I was trusting in these promises and doing the best I could to live the health message, and so far He's seen fit to protect me. Now, if I come down with it tomorrow, but so far He has protected me. Amen. And I'm going to keep trusting in Him. I'm not going to be foolish, but keep trusting in Him.